Hello everyone, I'm Rishi Persad. Welcome along to Racing Weekly, a podcast and YouTube show brought to you by Oddschecker in association with Bet365. As always, Sam Turner alongside me, but a particular pleasure to welcome a dear friend of both Sam and I, Hayley Moore, to the show. Hayley, it's great to have you on Racing Weekly. I don't imagine there are too many conversations that start without people asking you how your brother Josh is, first of all, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, it's good to see you both, Rishi and Sam, once again. But no, it's certainly something I'm a lot more comfortable answering now because he's doing really well since obviously the fallback in April. We had some very tough times to get through and we had some bad news in May, but he's made a really good recovery. And it's lovely to see him back over the stables up at Siswood alongside my dad working again. And he's just starting to strengthen up all the time. And it's just amazing to have my little brother back again. So very, very grateful for what's been, I think, a little bit of a miracle, really. But he's doing very well. So it's much easier now when I see people, and they ask all the time. We've recently been back jumping at my local track, Plumpton, and every other person is just inquiring after him. So it's nice to say that he's doing really well and he's making a full recovery, thank goodness.
Well, that's bright and positive news to start with. Slightly less positive and slightly less important, though, is the fact that last week I made a big thing of ending the show during the show about Ayr being a good bet in the Champion Stakes. And Sam, that's been one of the big news stories, not Ayr, obviously, in the Champion Stakes, but the fact that Baid is going to go for the Champion Stakes instead of the Arc. Obviously, that dampens my enthusiasm for Ayr. But what did you think of the news?
Not entirely unpredictable. I don't think, from the body language and also the vibes that were coming from William Haggas, that he was fully invested in the Arc project, if I'm honest. And I can sort of understand why. The thought of going there over a mile and a half on very soft ground in the first week of October probably didn't thrill him, especially when he's an odds-on chance for the Champion Stakes. Yeah, it's disappointing for the race. The Arc, as you grow up, has always got that prestige, that glamour, that glitz. The end of season European Championship over a mile and a half, and we've seen some absolutely fabulous horses win that race in years gone by, and they've gone right into the annals of history. And we revisit those races with great pleasure and great enjoyment. Perhaps not so much the case for the Champion Stakes in this country. I think the Irish version arguably has a little bit more glamour and prestige surrounding it. But we are where we are. I mean, it's the Connections decision. We've got to accept it. Unfortunately, I'm not sure. Particularly palatable for a lot of people who were looking for a great dust up in Paris over that weekend. One or two of us would be fortunate enough to be present this year, and we're looking forward to seeing Baid, and it would have been proper box office stuff, I think. But look, Longchamp's loss is certainly Ascot's gain, and that'll put a few thousand on the gate for Ascot, so I should imagine they're absolutely ecstatic about it.
Yeah, I echo many of those sentiments, Sam. But Hayley, I still think, as disappointing as I am on a personal level about Baid going for the Arc instead of the Champion Stakes, it's still possible that the Champion Stakes could be a big race. It depends who turns up. It could be a tough one for Baid, and might have to be his career best to end with at Ascot. What were your sentiments about how the decision, or by the decision that was made?
I think it's definitely the right decision. I was really worried about him going over to the Arc, especially trying out that trip for the first time. If I owned him, there's no way I'd be going over there to step him up in distance in what is likely to be testing conditions. So I never really could take him seriously as being an Arc contender, as much as there was chat and rumour about him going over there and they were going to consider their options. But if I owned him, he'd definitely be going to Champions Day. It will still be very tough. Ayr does look quite a short price now because we've got Baid likely to cut that target. But I do think a mile and a quarter is probably his optimum trip at Ayr. So even though he's a Derby and a King George winner, he's certainly got gears and pace for a mile and a quarter. And he can sometimes race a little bit keenly as well. So if you remember the Arc last year, he did do a little bit too much. So I do think he's got the pace for a mile and a quarter, even though he's got that stamina on his side. So I still think he'll be really good, decent, tough opposition for Bailly to see off, but obviously very much the opposition have all got to beat, don't get me wrong, but I do think it's the right decision, and it will be a tough task set for his final swan song.
Yeah, I'm still holding my 8-1 anti-post vouch on Adayar for the Champion Stakes. Each way, we're still in play. But that's a little chat about one of the important racing topics that we've discussed over the last week or so. But now on Racing Weekly, it's time for this week's Racing Recap. And we start this week's Racing Recap with two words: Roger Varian. What a weekend for the bespectacled, talented trainer that he is. What a wonderful Saturday that he enjoyed. A 7-timer, 34,838 to 1. Hayley, the star of the show was Sakheer in the Mill Reef. How impressed were you?
I was really impressed by him. Obviously, he went into the race with some nice runs under his belt, but we didn't know what he'd been beating. And he just got such a lovely way of going. He's a proper relaxed sprinter, so I think it opens up the options vastly for his future. I don't think we're going to be seeing him too soon by any means, so I kind of got the vibe that Roger Varian was a little bit annoyed with how the programme will unfold from him going forward from here, but they're very keen to try him over the 7 furlongs. I think that's going to be a great idea, so I think we'll get to see this horse only step forward and improve on what was a fantastic performance down at Newbury. It sounds as though he's likely to go to the Dewhurst, which obviously I think will be very competitive if he does head there, or the Jean-Luc Lagardère, but it's just the way he travelled through the race, quickened up, and just trying to pinhole him like to where he might go on. He looks like he's got options because he's got that physique of a sprinter, he's got the action of a sprinter, but just the fact that he can switch off and deliver at the back end of the race so strongly in the way he did, I think he's going to be very exciting. I'd love to see him if he does get supplemented for the Dewhurst against the likes of Chaldine. That could be a really exciting race to look forward to. So he very much has whet the appetite for the back end of the flat season.
He certainly has. He's 8-1 with Bet365 for the Guineas next year at the moment, Sam. Little Big Ben, Auguste Rodin are at the top of the market. Did he appeal to you as a 2,000 Guineas horse? There were some people who felt he's definitely going to stay further, some who felt that he might be a sprinter. Hayley's pointed out about his physique. Where do you stand on a Guineas tilt?
Not convinced as yet, just because he showed so much speed, both at Haydock and at Newbury. His dam obviously was a 5-6 furlong filly for Michael Dodds, so there's not a lot of stamina on that side of the pedigree. By Zoffany as well, I think he'll stretch out to 7, but as Hayley alluded to, I think he's got quite a big back end on him and he looks a little bit more of a sprinter. They didn't go a great gallop early on at Newbury. The overall time figure was quite modest really for a race of that class, but what you then saw was the electric turn of foot in the final 3 furlongs to take him clear of Rousing Encore, who had sort of loomed up at the 2 furlong marker, and Sakheer just left him for dead really and stretched out so well. He certainly doesn't lack a turn of foot, this horse, and I think I'd be probably keener to campaign him over shorter than a mile, if I'm honest. But you know, if he stretches out to 7 in the Dewhurst and gets that well, then they can dream going into the winter that he might sort of fill out, become a little bit more furnished, and then take in a trial perhaps in the spring before perhaps heading to the Guineas. Be a long time since Roger Varian had a true Guineas candidate, really. And great to see Roger hitting top form on Saturday. I notice you've got the bins on as a homage to the great man. And yeah, I mean, 7 winners up and down the country across 3 venues, a couple of near misses as well. Great day for David Egan, 4 winners for him, 3 of them for Varian. Yeah, fantastic weekend for them both.
Yeah, and I'm just mentioning about the Guineas. I'll mention one point. I think the one chance that he gives himself of staying further is the fact he settles so well. I think that's a crucial point for his future. He relaxes into his races beautifully for the rider, and I'm sure he makes their life a little bit easier. So fingers crossed, we'll see him again this season. You mentioned David Egan. He had a great day at Newbury. One of the other major winners he had was in the Legacy Cup. Stay Alert. She is a horse I absolutely adore. I love, again, the way she travels. She's got to turn a foot for a stayer. I'm not convinced that we've seen absolutely everything from her yet. I think there's more to come. She's 12-1 with Bet365 for the fillies and mares on Champions Day at Ascot. Hayley, does that appeal? I mean, she's improving, no doubt.
Yeah, it definitely appeals after what she did at the weekend. Right from the start of the race, there were quite a few of them that were off the bridle early, and the fact that she was so relaxed this day, which I think is only going to help her going forward for the fillies and mares race on Champions Day. The way she travelled through into the race late on, once she caught up with the rest of the field, with a furlong out, still just swinging out on the bridle. It was impressive when she got the gap, just to accelerate in such a short space of time. So she ran at her career best. She seems to have improved, but she just impressed me so much with how well she did to quicken in the manner that she did. And back to 1.5 miles, I think, is only going to be a positive for her, with her now proving that she can relax so well, if not a little bit too well. And I think everyone was a little bit alarmed in the early part of the race. Obviously, tactically, they made the decision from the stalls to get her to switch off, because we've seen her kind of lose her head a little bit and throw away races. But it was a completely different horse and an exciting one. So she's looking very attractive for me in the fillies and mares this year.
Well, Sam, Hayley mentioned being alarmed early on in the race. If anyone backed her, you'd have been alarmed late in the race, because David Egan didn't have things go his way. I mean, he was trapped in on the rail, but I felt she showed a turn of foot to get him out of trouble, and that is the sign of a very good horse.
It is, and it's also a sign of when things are running for you, you get that little bit of fortune, don't you? And you're on the horse that can quicken, like she managed to do there. David Egan's obviously enjoyed a sort of a golden, Indian summer, really. The last couple of weeks have been phenomenal for him. Good to see. Good lad. He's kept his head down well, despite various things going against him this year, and he's getting just reward for it now. And I think with Stay Alert, that she obviously pulled a chance away in that Lancashire Oaks. It just wasn't her running at all. She didn't enjoy that test or that day. For what reason, I don't know. But I like to see patiently ridden horses on the round track at Ascot, especially over the 1.5 miles there. I don't think there's a lot of future trying to make all the running at those sort of places. So the fact that she'll be switched off if she does go to the filly and mares, obviously got good form with Nashua from early on in the season at Newbury as well. She wasn't totally 100% for that race either. So you'd think that the fact that she's thriving at this time of year will suit her well when she goes to Ascot, and be disappointed if she didn't give a good account of herself there, especially as now they're working out the way to ride her, and the fact that she's just looked a little bit more sort of palatable in her races, and just the way that she's managed to just settle and drop ahead a little bit and deliver at the end.
I think that's true, and I've always felt 1.5 miles would be her optimum, and the fact that she can settle now, she's proven that she can settle, makes it very exciting. Just spinning through the rest of the racing that we saw at Newbury, we saw Mitbahi winning again for Roger Ver and David Egan. He's been considered for the Abbey and the Champion Sprint. Not sure which one he's going to go for. There was Stormbuster who won during the week at Newbury. He beat a horse called Highbank. I mean, there were some other performances at Newbury that I think will have a relatively significant impact later on in the season. Hey, was there anything in particular that really caught your eye outside of those that we've mentioned?
No, I suppose I'd just like to focus on Mitbahi, whether or not we see him on Champions Day racing over 6 furlongs. That's probably what they'll try him at now, but we're seeing quite a lot this season. Horses sharpening up, getting quicker, almost that Australian route when horses strengthen up and they sharpen up. And I just think that eventually when we see this horse over 5 furlongs, that's going to really be his trip. So we're looking forward to getting stuck into him when he just has a little bit more time. But he'll still, I'm sure, be a horse to keep on side Champions Day over the 6 furlongs, because he was impressive and it looked as though he's in as good a form as ever, and it really turned his season around. So he's a horse that I think will be certainly on my radar for the back end of this season, but particularly next year as well.
Sam, there's also I mentioned Stormbuster on the Friday. Sacred also won on that card, and it's good to see her bounce back to form. She won pretty impressively in the end. I think it was 6.5 lengths she beat her rivals. Stormbuster won by 5 lengths. Any of those perhaps you think might be worthy of following for the rest of the season?
As you touched on, it's good to see Sacred bounce back. She's a bit of a funny filly, but she, when she's good, she's very good. I thought there was one performance on Saturday that, probably didn't get a lot of column inches in the trade paper, but, Equiano Springs, who won that race at Newmarket, that sprint for the 3rd time, is now 4 from 4 on the Rolling Mile as well. I thought that was a tremendous training performance, really, to have a sprinter at the age of 8 under Tom Quealy to go and win that race in the manner that he managed to do. And, just such a terrific record of the Rowley Mile as well. Go there 4 times and win on all 4 occasions and win the same race 3 times. I thought that was, such a creditable training performance, and the riding performance wasn't too bad either.
Yes, not a bad ride, because he had to be cool because things didn't entirely go his way. So Hayley, you can smile about
that. That's one word, cool, that you would use to describe Tom Quealy, isn't it?
100%. Let's focus on the racing at the Ayr Gold Cup, Hayley. Summerghand. It was his 4th attempt at the race. In fairness, he's run in all the big handicaps over 6 furlongs. He has been a wonderful horse, but also a landmark day for rider Danny Tudhope, becoming the first Scottish-born jockey to win the race in 50 years. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it was lovely because Danny's a very quiet, measured rider who is incredibly talented, but he doesn't say a lot out of the saddle. And it was just lovely to see that enthusiasm from him when he crossed the line, punch of the air, and he was really celebrating. You could just see how much it meant to him to be born just down the road, to win your big local race. It's probably a lot of all his school friends that he's grown up with, that they've always, said, oh, if you won the Ayr Gold Cup, and it was definitely missing from his illustrious CV. He's won some great races in his riding career, but it was just lovely to see how much it meant to him, and the fact, I suppose, he was on the wrong one previously in the race when David O'Meara has been successful. So it just looked like it meant so much to him, and what a horse to come out on top. And good old Comanche Falls back in 2nd. He ran another huge race, and it was really competitive going in. It was good to see Mr. Wagyu continue his fine season as well. So you seem to feel like the right horses were up there, but it was just lovely on a jockey success there for Danny to lift that.
And I'd like to pay my respects to my colleague Sam Turner, who earlier this year highlighted that we ought to be following Summerghand. I can't remember exactly the juncture during the year, Sam, but you did say that you felt that he was coming back into form and in the right position in the handicap to strike. So can I ask, were you on?
Not a penny on, no. No, you've got a better memory than me. I can't even. We must have talked about 1,000 sprinters in this.
To be fair, season. I think it might have been before Royal Ascot, either before Royal Ascot or Goodwood. One of the, whether the Woking or the Stewards Cup, and you felt that he was just about. It looked like he was finding his stride again.
Well, cheers, Rish. You got a good crowbar out to get that one in. No, I was on Mr. Wagyu. I stayed loyal to him. I thought he ran really well again. He was coming back at the death, wasn't he? He's just such a strong stayer at 6, isn't he? And as is Summerghand, really, when they go a good lick, that's where you're going to see him at his best. And fair play to David O'Meara. He's kept 1 or 2 of these horses, these older horses, in great nick all throughout their campaigns. Obviously, he did it with Lord Glitters as well. And, he's had a few of these old stable stalwarts that have hung around the place for a while and often pay their way for him. Great run from Comanche Falls, probably hit the front a little bit too soon. Sort of pulled himself up a little bit. I thought Lucky Man ran really well for a 3-year-old in that race. Thought he excelled as well. And old Escobar, he wasn't disgraced, finishing 8th, and maybe they've reinvented him a little bit as a sprinter, and perhaps something like the Wokingham next year, where they do come back to you a little bit more, and the track he's run well at before. But he continues in really, really good heart. He runs sort of twice a week for them, doesn't he? And it was a very informative race and quite an enjoyable one as well. But fair play to Summerghand and those who kept the faith with him.
Yes, those of us who kept the faith and didn't go for Mr. Wagyu.
I think if you back Summerghand in every race, I think you'd still be about 20 quid down to a level stage profit this year. But look, it was good to see him get his head in front.
There were some other fabulous performances at Ayr during the week. One on Saturday, Hayley, was from Royal Champion in the Doonside Cup. I'll just mention some others as well, and you can tell me your pick. I thought Prince of Pio, or Pillow, was a commanding performance in the Highbury Rosebery. Gale Force Mare, one of the stars of the season for me. Danzan and Dusky Lord in the Bronze and Silver Cup, respectively. I mean, which of those do you think will leave a lasting impression on you for the rest of the season?
Well, I'd just be respectful of Gale Force Maya quickly. I think you can almost set your clock by her, and it's been great to see the way she's just continued to improve this season. Really reliable. I think she was definitely in plenty of people's big play spots on that Friday. So it was great to see her come out on top. And the other horse who was really impressive, it was a fantastic day for Jack Mitchell, and the way Royal Champion came through to win that listed Doonside Cup. He is the horse that I'll be taking out. Yukon Glen's a very good yardstick. You sort of know where you are with him, but for him to pull clear over 5 lengths, I think that was really taking. Had Stormy Antarctic back in third as well, and that will be a horse that I think is going to be really exciting for the Roger Berrien team going forward. I think we're going to see him lining up potentially on Ascot Kipco Day, the Champions Day, but he just seems to be improving all the time. But that was a real step forward up at Ayr at the weekend. I know he's handled difficult tracks, your local track and handicap company down at Epsom so far, but that was just a real, I think, coming of age, and it was as if the penny dropped or something. But we just saw one of his best performances to date. So he's very much the horse that I'll be taking out from the weekend on Saturday up there. And then there was some good racing on Friday, as you mentioned, Prince of Pillow. The way he won the Rosebery was very taking fashion, really uncomplicated. That's what I like the best about him, from the front as well. And it just looks as though Keith Dalglish is having a really wonderful season, which is so deserved. I think they work incredibly hard, and he seems to have a better class of horse this year. So it was just great to see him with a horse going off like that and being able to come out on top in such taking fashion. So, yeah, very much a horse to follow from the Friday up at Ayr.
Yeah, he's definitely an exciting young sprinter. But I think I'm with Hayley on this, Sam. I think Royal Champion, that was a breakout performance, one that suggests, because it was the thing that struck me afterwards was what they were saying, Connections, and Jack Mitchell was saying that the horse works so well, and that was the first time on the racecourse that he's delivered the type of performance that they've always believed he had, which makes him quite exciting for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I love the way he shot clear. I mean, the speed figure was very, very healthy as well, as it had been for a couple of his previous efforts this year, both at Windsor behind Regal Reality and then Anmat in the Rose of Lancaster as well. Another handsome compliment to Anmat from that performance from Royal Champion. Very well backed as well. I think it was 9-2, sort of 24 hours before. Half those odds went off very strongly supported against James Horton's York winner, who looked a potential group horse in the waiting, but he was left trailing in the wake, really, of a really stunning performance. Just one horse I'd quite like to mention, the Silver Cup on Saturday, was Jump the Gun, who admittedly I did put up in the paper. I thought he ran really well to finish 5th. Got no luck at all down the standside rail. Unfortunately, he had hyperfocus coming back in his lap for much of the last couple of furlongs, Paul Mulrennan. But then when he switched inside, he's took off. Quite a free horse, ran behind Fresh over 7 furlongs at Ascot in that handicap, and just didn't quite get home. Did too much that day. But back to 6 at Ayr, I thought he was a little bit of an unlucky loser. I'm not saying he'd have beaten Dusky Lord because he sort of bounded clear down the middle of the track, but I think he probably would have been 2nd or 3rd. And I think he's one to just keep on side. Certainly goes very well at Ayr, and wouldn't be surprised to see him run well back at Ascot if that's where Connections want to go.
They jumped the gun, something to bear in mind, and not something that my dear friend Sam Turner can ever be accused of. And that brings to an end this week's racing recap. We'll take a pause, and when we resume, we'll be looking ahead to the excellent racing coming up at Newmarket this week. Right, time to look ahead to the action coming up at Newmarket. Of course, the big betting race of the week is the Bet365 Cambridgeshire. And what a race it is, potentially as well for William Haggas. Qatar Prix, he's got horses scattered at the top of the market, including the top two horses, Mujtaba and Protagonist. Hayley, I'll start with you here. Either of the Haggas horses appeal, or is there something lurking elsewhere that you quite like?
Yeah, both of the William Haggas horses appeal. You can make a very strong case for either of those. But I'm going to try and look away from his dominant season that he's having so far. And I was quite interested to see what kind of price Great Gadian is going to be going off, because he's a horse that I don't think he's got anything up his sleeve by any means with his handicap mark, but I still think he's going to be competitive off his current rating. And he bumped into a pretty useful horse of Saeed's last time out down at Ascot, who won very easily. But I still just think that he showed that he's pretty competitive, and I just think he'll be able to be on the premises in his current form, his stable form, of course, fresh from the weekend. And so he's a horse that I'll be keeping a close eye on, just as a bit of an each way play, because of the form, his recent form that he's in. The stable form absolutely set alight today, over the weekend as well. I just thought he might represent a little bit of value. He's had just over 3 weeks since we last saw him as well. I think it's a nice bit of spacing. So he's a horse that I'll very much be keeping on side coming into the weekend. Of the two Haggas horses, equal cases to be made from them, but Protagonist, from what we saw from him last time out, I think that he's going to be a better horse as we see him line up at the weekend, because he has had a nice confidence boosting win down at Sandown. I think he's uncomplicated. I just thought he travelled through the race with great ease from the front, and then he just managed to see off Dual Identity. It was as if he had something up his sleeve. So if I had to be pinned down, I'd go with Protagonist of the Haggas horses towards the top of the betting, because I think there could be more to come from him. I thought it was quite a cute ride by Kieran Fallon. I think he just squeezed him, but didn't give him too hard a race, even though he managed to come out on top in quite a narrow victory. I thought it was a very taken performance.
Well, Protagonist is 9-1 behind Mujtaba, who's 5-1. These prices with Bet365. The Great Gadian that you mentioned, 33-1. That's quite an interesting shot. Obviously, as you mentioned as well, Roger Veron stable flying. Sam, what are your thoughts on the likeliest winner at this stage of the Cambridge? And obviously, bear in mind that the last couple of years, 40-1 shots have won. And also worth bearing in mind, the draw, high numbers favoured.
Yeah, seemingly in recent years, yeah. I haven't seen an up-to-date weather forecast, Rish. I must admit. I don't know whether you're down there this weekend, but most of the early part of the week is supposed to be set fair, so I can't imagine any great change in terrain down at Newmarket. Like Hayley, I like that Sandown performance of Protagonist. I also like the run of the second, Dual Identity. I think there's been a few sharks sniffing around Dual Identity for him to go down under to Australia. Not surprised at all, because he really seems to have found his stride in recent times. I think he's run 9 times over 10 furlongs, this horse, and he's only been out of the first 3 once, and that was on very soft ground. So I think if the ground's good, Dual Identity gets a nice draw and a good pace to run at, which seems assured in a race of this nature. I think he'll be there and thereabouts again. I think the deal, has possibly been done with the Australian owners, that he manages to race in this race before going down under in current connections colours as well, which is great. So I think he's found his stride, and he'd definitely be on my shortlist along with Protagonist. I think those two from that Sandown race, the speed figure was so good that I think you've got to consider those. And the other one I quite like is First View, who managed to win at Kempton last time under Christian Howarth. I think he's ridden him 3 times. He's finished second and won twice. He represents Connections, who won this last year with Bedouin's Story as well, Saeed bin Saror, who I always have a second look at when he runs horses in the handicaps. Unfortunately, I didn't 12 months ago, but there we go. And he was quite impressive, I thought, at Kempton. Stuck to his task really well. But it's that John Smith's form that I really like. The amount of winners that have come out of that race at York. And Matt, obviously, Akelowa, Spirit Dancer, First View, of course. What's the Story? Good Birthday, Forest Falcon, and Jewel in My Crown, who finished second last. They've all come out and won since. There's been other notable performances to come out of that Nays Mar performance. And I just like the fact that sides not averse to using Stefano Kirky or Christian Howarth on these horses, and Christian's going the right way at the moment. He's riding really well. He's had a fair bit of success this year, and that Kempton performance has already thrown up Billy Mill, who managed to win at a big price at Newcastle. So there are winners all interwoven in First View's form, and I think sort of 16-1 a horse for him over the 9 as well should be perfect. He didn't quite get the extended 10, I didn't think, at York. Just faded late on after racing up with a strong gallop that day. And as I say, that race is working out so well. I'd have to give him a bit of a chance at 16s as well. Okay.
On that theme of a horse just fading late on, I'm quite interested in Jazati if he gets the all clear from Charlie Fellows to run in the race. I've always felt that he's been stretched. He's been stretched by a mile and a half, certainly in the past. And he ran over a mile and a half at Newmarket last year, and he actually ran pretty well. I thought he came there to have a winning chance and ran out of puff. And in fact, at the race at Windsor that he ran in last time, which was a listed race, again, he came into contention, having been a little bit keen, seeing daylight, and he came into contention there and just ran out of gas late on. I've seen him do that a couple of times, but he's also got some fair ability already. Anyway, he's proven that, which is obviously why he's competing in listed class. And just a strongly run race over 9 furlongs at Newmarket looks right up his street, and I thought he would be a bit of an each-way play in Jazati for me. So that's a look at the Cambridgeshire for Hayley, Sam and I. The Cheveley Park Stakes is obviously interesting in the sense that Aidan O'Brien has tended to dominate it. Tenebra's won it last year, and he won it 3 years in a row from 2016 through to 2018. I'm imagining that Hayley, Sam, if Meditate runs in the race, we don't oppose her, or is there something that you think is worthy of taking her on?
No, we don't oppose her. If she does have a quick backup, she's going to be far too tough to beat. And against the opposition, she's got some lovely horses against her, but I still can't see anything better than her from what we've seen. I know she was beaten the last day, but my word, that was a freak performance with the turn of foot to get her reeled in over in Ireland. But there's a few of them that I'd be a bit concerned about, and I would worry about Trillium over 6 furlongs. Again, I like the fact that she started off life, her first 2 runs were over 6 furlongs, but she travelled so well and nearly did a bit too much at Doncaster, back over 5 furlongs. I remember talking to Pat Dobbs after he won on her at Doncaster. They've had to do a lot of work with her. I think Sam Hitchcock's really helped switch her off at home just to try and tailor her enthusiasm in the right way. And she almost travelled through too well through the race, he said, at Doncaster. So I'd be a bit concerned with her going to Newmarket over 6 furlongs. I just worry about her getting cover, switching off. So I think I'd be happy to see her sticking to 5 furlongs, as she just seems to be one of those that's getting quicker with plenty of pace. Swing Along could continue to be competitive over this trip, as she's got a lot of natural speed, and she's been a big improver this season, and I think she deserves her place to line up in here. And Rafe Beckett's a couple of his that I'm interested in as well. He does so well with his fillies, but Lazou's got some very good form coming into this. Again, I just worry that she might be a little bit too fresh. We haven't seen her since that win down in the Ascot Keeneland, which would just make me a little bit concerned that she might be almost a bit too fresh, because that better run came off the back of a recent run. But I just think if she's kept busy, we might see an improvement. Obviously, you can't keep running them every week, but I just wonder if missing a couple of engagements would be the right thing. But who am I to question Rafe Beckett? I just hope she doesn't throw her race away by being a bit over the top and keen, a bit like Trillium can be. So there's a couple of them that I just worry about their temperament more than anything coming into the Cheveley Park. Whereas Meditate, we know that she's does everything right and the right way round. So that for me makes her a huge standout against the opposition that can just be a bit temperamental, Rishi.
Well, you don't like anything that's temperamental, and certainly Meditate has been very straightforward so far, Sam. And the only horse to beat Meditate, we're potentially talking about a worldie in Tahira. So Meditate, a good thing for you?
Yeah, if she shows up, I think so. Hopefully that run in the Moyglare on soft ground. I wonder whether that just took its toll in the closing stages on her. But I agree with you, Rich. I think she was beaten by one of the classiest 2-year-old fillies I've seen for a long time. For a filly to do that second time up, just off the back of a maiden win, and go into group company, and her rider was just so happy to let Meditate just go and dominate and just sit, 2-3 lengths off, almost coming to the distance, and then just go push button acceleration and whiz past her. Meditate had run to a really good level, in the debutante and the Albany. She's a real class filly in her own right, multiple group race winning filly, and Tahira made her look daft. And I think she's a standout in this race. I'd probably take slightly the opposite view to Hayley with Lazoo. I think the fact that she's had a 2-month break might just benefit her. She'd come here a fresher horse than the likes of perhaps Meditate, Trillium. The Platinum Queen, I doubt, will run. But yeah, it's a difficult race to try and evaluate and analyse until you see the final lineup, really. And I think the doubts about Meditate running mean that she's around about the 2-1 mark. I think once she's confirmed, I think she'd be a pretty short price favourite, because I think, without shadow of the doubt, that's the best sort of fillies juvenile form that we've seen this season, the Moyglare.
Okay, yeah, I agree. I think that was the best 2-year-old race for fillies so far. Potentially one of the best races we've seen, with Tahira beating Meditate, and they were miles clear of everything else. I'm actually interested in one of the other horses behind them for another race, which we'll come to in just a moment. So I think Meditate as well in the Shigley Park. The middle park, a little bit harder to work out, I felt. Hayley Marshman is the favourite. He bumped into Noble Style in the Gimcrack last time. I thought it was a fantastic run from Marshman, because I thought he had the race won about a furlong out before Noble Style ran him down. What are your thoughts on him and the likeliest winner?
Yeah, I think Marshman still looks a bit of a work in progress, so I'd be a little worried about him coming up against some very battle-hardened opposition over the weekend. But his last race probably did just come a little bit too quickly, so we should see improvement again from him. And that was, it's pretty solid form in the book as well. So I think he'll be very exciting. But against the likes of Blackbeard, he is very experienced, and we've got no little Big Bear now, so he's certainly picks up the baton for the Ballydoyle team. There was talk he could potentially step up and trip, but with Little Big Bear out the way, I think that this could be a good target for him in the middle park, or I suppose potentially the Lagardère. But I think the 6 furlong's going to be absolutely ideal for him, so he's going to be the selection. It'll be tough. You've got the likes of Persian Force. He's been a solid performer. He's very reliable. He could be interesting. Like Sam was just saying about Lazoo, he's freshened up, which will be good for him because he had quite a busy time of things. And I'd like to see him actually running on some autumn ground, slightly softer, on the softer side of good, just with his action. I was hoping he'd go off to France at some stage, but maybe not, maybe next season. Royal Scotsman, I thought, could just represent a little bit of value in the race as well. I'm happy to forgive a poor run at York and not give up on him, because he was impressive in the Richmond Stakes at Goodwood, and it's a very well balanced horse, so I thought he should cope with Newmarket very nicely. And then Mischief Magic, how can you dare discount anything from Charlie Appleby? He's absolutely flying along, and that horse continues to progress, so he'll be on the radar. But if Blackbeard lines up battle hardened, I think he's going to be the one to beat.
Okay, Blackbeard for you. Sam, Hayley's pointed out quite a few of the main contenders. Is your winner in there?
I really like Marshman. I think that race at York, the Gimcrack, came a little bit too early for him. I think he got to the front and dossed a little bit. Noble Style, a class horse that he is, and sadly won't be running this weekend because of a minor setback. But I think Marshman has that little bit of star quality about him. I don't think we've seen the best of him yet. I mean, obviously at Thirsk he was an 8 or 9 length winner, and they were almost compelled to run in the Gimcrack, didn't they? Local trap really to Carl Burke. His 2-year-olds have gone so well all season. In fact, the season full stop has gone so well for that team at Spigot Lodge. So yeah, he'd be very much towards the top of my shortlist. I think he's got that little bit of X factor, just a little bit of a question mark whether he handles the ground okay. And I like Mischief Magic. He comes from a sort of a different direction, really. He's not really the orthodox way of coming into these races in some respects, that he's gone and won on the all-weather. And you know, whether he can translate that class synthetic performance that he produced when you were present in the Cyrenia Stakes is open to question. But look, you know, he's good at Goodwood. He, like Hayley says, it's a good point she makes about Royal Scotsman being well balanced and coping with the undulations of the downs there. Mischief Magic certainly did that. He ran behind Royal Scotsman first time up, needed that experience, then went and built on it with a really you know, authoritative performance in that in the maiden. Went to Newmarket, bolted up at short odds, and then, as we saw in the Cyrenia, turned in virtually last under Pat Dobbs and just went past the whole field as if they were stood still. So yeah. I do think he's sort of creeping under the radar a little bit into this race, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him run a massive one.
Yeah, I felt one of the wow moments from a 2-year-old this season when he won on the all-weather at Kempton. Now, I do have that, and you've just highlighted a slight element of doubt about translating the all-weather turn of foot that you show on a lovely surface and then trying to reproduce it at Newmarket. And there, talking about the weather, there is a little bit of rain forecast Friday, Saturday. Not heavy, but there are showers forecast on Friday, some drizzle on Saturday as well. So that's something to bear in mind. But he has shown, obviously ran first time out with a little bit of cut in the ground at Goodwood, and he's won on good ground. He's won on fast ground and on the all-weather. So hopefully he'll be okay. Really respect Marshman, though. The form of the Gimcrack, I think, is good, because Cole Casey was behind them, came out and won at Doncaster. And I think he is the one to beat. But I think Mischief Magic, I'm going to stick with him and that visual impression he created when winning the Cyrenia. On Friday, a couple of races just to have a quick look at. The Joel Stakes, first of all. Potapova and Tempest, Hayley, are the horses who are being considered for favouritism at the moment. Potapova won under what I thought was an excellent ride at Sandown last time. Is she the one for you, or Tempest, who's on a roll now? They've done brilliantly since he's switched stables to Archie Watson.
Yeah, incredible, isn't it? How Tempest is clearly just getting better with age after he's had his issues, recovered, got gelded, and Archie's just getting the best out of him, and he's on an upward curve, which is amazing. So it's 6 years old now, but he's very uncomplicated. He's an honest horse, and he beat some pretty solid performers in that Group 3 over at Deauville last time out. So I think that Tempest very much looks the one to beat in the Joel Stakes. Potapova, like you said, bounced back to form, dropping in grades in the Atalanta Stakes. And that form has had a boost already, because we saw Mrs. Fitzherbert won a Group 3 over at Chantilly last weekend, and Mise en Scene, who was only back down the field in 6th, I thought she ran a great race back in the John Muster at Yarmouth last week as well. But Mujtaba, he let me down last time out, and that was disappointing at Goodwood. I thought that was his race to win, so maybe he overdid it in the run, but still ran below form, so he needs to bounce back. So he's very much not on my radar. Potapova, that form boost, a real positive, but I'm going to stick with Tempest, because I'm not quite sure where the bar's set with him since he's had this late revival in his career.
Yeah, I can see why you'd want to be with Tempest. I mean, he has been rock solid since he's been. I mean, he won for Archie Watson back in the start of the year, and it's been wonderful to see that good form continue, particularly recently. I'm not giving up on Mujtaba yet, because I thought the race at Goodwood has worked out. I mean, he bumped into Jadumi, and Finest Sound ran a great race in America on the weekend behind the games. So I'm not going to give up on him just yet, but he's not. I don't think he's delivering what he promised. He's still running to a good level, but I don't think he's delivering what he's promised. I like one at a big price. I'm going to save that for just a moment and savour your thoughts on the Joel Stakes, Sam, before I revealed my ridiculous suggestion.
Savour my thoughts. Oh, there conjures up a view. I mean, yeah, as Hayley says, Mujtaba let me down. I mean, if everybody could have a pound for every time that was muttered about this horse, then we'd all be very rich indeed. And my often trotted stat is that he's 4 from 5 over 7 furlongs and 0 from 5 over 8. But if he's going to win anywhere over a mile on decent ground, it could well be Newmarket. He's been there 3 times, he's won twice, and he's only suffered defeat once, and that was in the Guineas. So this is probably his track for a mile. He's also in a 7 furlong race in a couple of weeks' time at the next meeting, and I'd probably be keener on him in that than I am in this. Pogo, second in the race last year, should run well again, you'd imagine. whether he gets to do his own thing in front with Tempest in opposition. Where they place the stalls will be interesting. I think they're down the middle. They're either middle or stand side for this day, I think. And Pogo came down the stand side rail and he got beat by Ben Battle, who of course was a real old veteran warrior in this race. He'd won it 2 years before, been placed, and then came back and won it at the age of 7, I think, last year, and beat Pogo, who again ran valiantly. But there's no Kieran Schumacher for Pogo. Of course, he's got such a brilliant alliance with him, but he's popped a collarbone, I think, so he won't be riding this weekend. I thought the one horse that had the potential to be a lot better than we've already seen in this country is Check and Challenge, who I think Danny Tudhope is going to ride. He's already jocked up, and I think that's a really positive booking because he rode him in the Guineas, didn't really cut much ice in the Guineas, was only beaten 10 lengths by Caribas, but had previously won at Newcastle with Danny on as well. Went to France, won his Group 3 last time. He was really, really disappointing. I thought it could, but he just didn't seem to handle the track particularly well that day. I think this would be a better test for him with the promise of a reasonable gallop with Tempest and Pogo in the race. Hopefully Danny can snake his way through and pick him off late on.
Okay. Yeah, I think there have been excuses for the 2 runs, the 2 bad runs he's had this season. Obviously, one was the Guineas, and I don't think Goodwood went his way. He got messed about at the start as well. So I definitely think he's a decent, interesting each-way proposition. The one I like at a bigger price as well is Bashka Rover, if she gets the all clear for the race. I believe that her last couple of runs, you've just looked at a horse who just wasn't enjoying quicker ground. And I know she's won on good ground, but she's also won on soft ground, and she's a daughter of Pivotal. The going we're not going to get fast ground at Newmarket, and there's some potential rain in the air. So if that comes, I'm quite happy to give her another go. I'm sure she's better than we've seen on her last 2 runs. She just looked to me on the last 2 runs, she wasn't quite letting herself down. When she was past the stretch, she wouldn't quite go with it, and she was sort of making up an effort, but it didn't seem to be that comfortable. So hopefully with a little bit of ease in the ground might allow her to show her full ability. The Rockfell Stakes, also on Friday. The horse who's currently favourite is a horse called Commissioning, a beautifully bred daughter of Kingman for the John Thady Gosden team. Won first time out, Hayley. She beat a horse of Sir Michael Stance, who I think was well touted, or at least the dogs were making some sort of noise before the race, and Commissioning beat her convincingly. Do you like her for the race?
Yeah, and for her to go out and do it first time, there's always huge improvement from the Gosden team. So stepping right up in grade, but you know that she'll take a big step forward from that novice stakes on the July course over 7 furlongs. So a trip that we know is absolutely ideal for her. And the race has thrown out a couple of winners so far, nothing too much to get excited about, but she was impressive. And it is just, you just see such big improvement from that stable. They're never ready first time out. They're always short prices, don't deliver, then they take a massive step forward at a nicer price and often win. So I'm expecting big things from Commissioning in the Rockfell. Interesting that Olivia Muraldon will show her class last time in the debutant stakes behind a very talented Meditate. That's very strong form for the Irish contender coming over, and there should, I think, be more to come from her as well. I like the way she travelled through the race very smoothly, and then she picked up as well, obviously not on the same kind of level as Meditate, but that's fine because she's very, very good. But I think she can prove as well that she's travelled over to the UK in the past. She came over on a maiden at Newbury, so she's very exciting, and one that I'm expecting to continue to progress on. And the other one just to mention is Sydney Arms Chelsea, who impressed me last time in Deauville. A horse who's been a lot of fun for the connection so far. I wouldn't discount a good Group 2 run from her either. So expecting big things from Commissioning stepping forward. Olivia Muraldon, very solid form in the book, so we know where we're at with her, and hoping that Sydney Arms Chelsea will continue to progress as well for Charlie Hills.
Okay, but Commissioning, the one that they've got to beat. Sam, you in agreement? Commissioning?
Yes and no. I think she's got undoubted potential, obviously. She had the hood on, didn't she, for the first run? She was quite easy to back. Frankie Dettori was quite keen to take her away from the other runners, have a little bit of a solo. I think she caught them out a little bit, the way that she sort of quickened up and lengthened and beat prepense. As Hayley rightly alluded to, that the 5th and the 9th have won since. So it looks reasonable form. She's by Kingman as well. It's obviously very, very talented. But, you know, a once raced horse going into a Group 2, I think probably stats and trends will tell you that, you know, they are sometimes horses to get against at short prices. And I quite like Queen Maraude. I think she's a pretty professional, doughty filly. I think she's got a bit of class as well, as we saw in the debutante. She seems to have improved for the step up to 7. And that last run in Ireland was, I'd say, a stone better than anything she'd achieved previously. So I think there are a lot of positives for having a good look at her each way if she was to line up. Commissioning is obviously the sexy one, but, you know, I'd imagine that Queen Maraude just might have a little bit more nous about her and can perhaps justify some each way support in that race.
Okay, so Olivia Muraldon for Sam. I'm just looking at her. She's currently, so commissioning is currently 11-4. Olivia Muraldon 6-1. The horse I like is Never Ending Story, who ran in the Moyglare last time, and I thought she travelled almost as well as Tahira, and I say that to quantify things because obviously I don't think a 2-year-old has travelled as well as Tahira all season long, but she travelled beautifully through the race, and just as she was about to launch her challenge, she got swept aside by something that just balked into her, and then she tried to make another run again and then hampered twice, yet she still ran on, and I felt that she could have been the second best filly in the race. I felt she would have picked up Meditate. It's an assumption, but at 7-1, she's shown lots of ability so far, outstanding pedigree, improving with racing, I think. So I'm fairly keen on her. Should she take her chance in the Rockfell? That is Never Ending Story for me on Friday. And I think that's just about it for this edition of Racing Weekly. Hayley, thank you so much for joining us. It's nice to get the old team back together again. Hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it's really good at this sort of early start of the week to be looking ahead to the weekend. It sort of gets you set up, geared up as well, and hopefully find a little bit more value as well. So yeah, really good fun to see you both again.
Well, you're always welcome back. Sam, as always as well. Great to see you, pal. Hope you have a good week. Look forward to catching up soon. Thanks to Sam and Hayley. Don't forget, if you liked what you heard or watched in this or any of our previous episodes, then please leave us a kind review on Apple Podcasts or in the comments section on YouTube. And we will be back next week looking ahead to one of the greatest races anywhere in the world, the Arc. But for now, from Hayley, Sam and myself, the team on Racing Weekly, bye-bye.